What is the Raconteur Collection? The Raconteur Collection is a show hosted by Jack and Charlie, two brothers who have a passion for anything and everything. You see, the Raconteur Collection is all about everything, anything, and, well, nothing. Do you miss hanging out with your friends and talking about random stuff? Well, we may be right for you. Do you like video games, anime, all those nerdy topics? Do you like deep tangents and stories of unremarkable yet remarkable lives? Join the Raconteur Collection. Follow the life of someone just like you. Charlie, an aspiring writer and super nerd, and Jack, a jack of all trades and fellow everyman. Oh, and did I mention the random bursts of creative storytelling, as with the bonus episodes of Tales of Ephemera, a storytelling show about stories from all realities. Yes, you heard that right. What, are you still waiting to follow us? We'll talk to you soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Raconteur Collection. You might be curious, wow, Charlie, you sound so different today. Yes, I do. Mainly because I'm having to record over a headset rather than my normal mic. I couldn't stop the crackling coming from my snowball mic, and Jack and I probably, sat there and troubleshot with it for maybe 30, 40
half an
minutes.
hour. Yeah, at least half an hour.
I was getting real frustrated, so I said, you know what, I'll just do it on this mic, and we'll troubleshoot over the week, so at least we can have an episode that goes up in time. Yep. But, so that's why I sound different today. Hopefully next week it'll be back to normal. Before, we jump into our topic, though, Jack, how you doing today, man? How you doing on this little bit of a different start today? A little bit of some would say, and some would say this, actually, a new chapter.
Charlie, you know what? I'm excited because, as you would say, it is a new chapter. A new chapter, not only in the collection of the Raconteur, but also a new chapter in life. Every week is its own chapter. You know what I'm saying? You have, is it 52 chapters a year? I always forget if it's 52 or 54 weeks in a year.
Do you know what I am saying?
Do you know what I am saying? Regardless, I'm looking stupid right now. I'm going to just continue. You have so many chapters in a year, so each week is a chapter, and write the best story you can. My week was fine. Laura and I have been talking a lot about work and how we kind of want to change things up a little bit. I might move to merchandiser, and she might move to part-time. But right now, dude, we're trying to work on consolidating our monthly expenses, like our bills and stuff, because it adds up quick, man. And
yeah, it does.
We've been looking into it, and the average payment you'd be making on a house is less than what we pay a month for rent. So
it's a lot harder to get a house though than it is to rent
it's just crazy.
Apartment.
It's crazy to me that hey, yeah, payments on a house are $500 a month, but you can't get in here for. Hey, Ellie, can you not do that, please? It's like $500 a month for the house here, but you can't really move in because you don't qualify because of these sometimes arbitrary circumstances. But hey, $850 a month for rent on a place you're never going to actually own, and if anything breaks, you essentially got to take care of it. Yeah, that's fine.
Wait,
you qualify.
Why do you? So your landlord won't take care of broken things?
Oh well, I mean, we're like, hey, our dryer isn't drying properly, and then she's like, well, just don't run. She goes in, looks at it, and is like, looks fine to me. And our dryer, we basically have to dry our clothes for, at minimum, 2 hours, almost regardless of load size. So
it sounds like maybe the dryer vent's clogged.
Dude, we've tried checking the vents and done it ourselves, but we're also like, if we don't want to try to do anything, because if something breaks, it's technically our fault because we're tampering with it.
Right.
So, also to talk about just our old complex is trying to charge us for, well, they were trying to charge us for the water heater that broke. Because we got it in the mail, like, hey, here's stuff you got to pay for, blinds, whatever, shampoo of the carpet that I guess we had to pay for, even though it got ruined because the unit next to us flooded and that ruined our carpet. Anyways, but then there was like, hey, your starting balance for charges that you have to pay us is $400, and we're like, excuse me?
Wow.
So we disputed that. We got that taken care of, and we're like, this is bogus. We're not paying this, basically. So we give them a call, and they're like, oh, we don't know. So I'm going into a lot of,
no, that's fine, man. That's what this early part's for.
So, but this whole week has been pretty, pretty average week. Been playing a bit of Skyrim again. Char and I have been playing a lot of RTS games like Age of Empires and StarCraft, and
we have,
stuff like that.
Really
so, yeah, it's been a pretty decent week. No real complaints. Charlie, how about you?
For me, it's been a pretty good week. I got my second shot this last Tuesday. And so kind of like Wednesday was kind of just like a dud day for me because I was just kind of tired. But didn't really get sick or anything like that. It was actually pretty mild for me. Just kind of fatigued and like, sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, had a kind of a nice 4 days off. I'll be honest, like not as like productive as I would like, but on the opposite side of that, I feel like they've been a very restful 4 days off for me. And that's
nice.
I definitely feel like I needed it. It's been nice to kind of like just rest and relax and play some video games and just have some fun and like not, worry too much about, I don't know, everything else. I've even been kind of lax on my working out and stuff. So, but I'm kind of planning on, Monday, get a fresh start on it, kind of get like a fresh new schedule going with that. Got some D&D we're playing tonight, so I'm excited for that.
Nice.
But yeah, it's been fun, man. Of course, I'm still writing. Just been, again, random stuff lately. I got a message from one of our patrons, our Aunt Becky, actually, and she was mentioning to me, some stuff about the story, how she's working on some sequencing things because she has the test copy of my book right now. For all those out there who don't know, I'm currently writing a book and have like some test copies out, just early copies for, story sequencing and stuff. So. But I'm really excited to hear from her. She said that I should definitely keep writing, that I have a good mind for it, so I'm excited to see what she has to say. I mean, good and bad about all of that. It'll just be nice to hear back about it, because, man, it's been, about 2 months, I think, since I had those copies printed. And I know that, like, 2 months in the grand scheme of things is... a decent amount of time, I guess, to finish a 600-page book, but it's still hard. I think it's just because, like, ultimately, when it comes down to it, I'm just excited. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah, for
what
sure. And that always makes the waiting worse, for sure.
Right. I feel like in some ways I'm like waiting for the finale of my favorite show, and I'm like, what are they gonna think? What's it gonna go? You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, exactly.
But other than that, work is going well. I mean, work is just kind of work right now. I'm definitely it's kind of settling in my mind a little bit, and this feeds a little bit into our topic, so I might save it.
Okay.
Settling in my mind to like look around for some different stuff, especially more like freelance work and stuff like that I could have some extra income coming in from things I like to do. So we'll talk about that when the time comes. But as far as easy housekeeping stuff, I mean, or just how my week has been, it's been good. So Jack, I'm ready to dive into this topic. This has definitely been one I've been looking forward to, and I'm kind of excited to see where this new chapter of the Raconteur collection goes, because I want to do some more, like, I guess for lack of a better word, like thematic or feeling type topics.
Definitely.
And so we'll see how the reception is, and kind of, I feel like we're at our best when we are talking about things we really care about. And so hopefully that kind of comes through, even though I sound, like I do when I'm playing video games with you. Hopefully that doesn't bother people too much. So.
Oh, dude, I've heard some pretty, some of the, when COVID was in full effect, and people were like, doing podcasts, like over Discord or Zoom or whatever, kind of like what we do now. But man, some of them were not ready for it. It has some pretty bad quality. Like, if you ever watched some of the great Game Grumps, when they like watch compilations of like, their best moments or whatever, Aaron has like, full HD webcam, great microphone, but like it's always out of focus. And so his microphone's in focus, but he's out of focus. Yeah. And then Dan is like on like a 360p webcam, and so like when he moves, it's like all like it's so
like
good.
His like a laptop.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. So honestly, I think what shines through honestly more so is the personality. And I just hit the desk. I'm sorry. Oh, that's a big wave. I gotta go back and fix that. Or you guys are just gonna hear that. You guys are just gonna hear that. Look, my desk situation is gonna be something that's gonna be plaguing me until I can really put some money into a setup. So, anyways, I am down to get started. Charlie, if you want to take the lead on isolation.
Of course. Oh, by the way, for everybody out there who doesn't know, I believe I posted it in our Raconteur Banter Discord. But the Dead Space remake, oh my god, man. I was excited for that.
Dude, looks really so cool.
Yeah. Really excited. Of course, it's one of those things as well that it's a very double-edged sword. I love the original Dead Space, and so it's going to be, I think, a high bar for me when coming into this remake. But I think their heart's in the right place. I mean, they said, like, no microtransactions. They want to kind of honor what the original game was, so I'm all down for it. Anyways,
for sure.
Isolation. I wanted to do this topic for a couple reasons. Mainly, so over the past year and a half, coming up on 2 years, we've been dealing with COVID and social isolations, as well as, just isolations from friends and family. While that will definitely play a big part in the topic today, because that's, very current in people's minds, I also wanted to look at isolation in a very, different light. So, self-isolation, as in, you're isolating yourself from other people, mental isolation, where, you're physically there and you're interacting with people, but you've kind of mentally pulled back, and you don't really let anybody in past that kind of mental barrier or wall. And then, some actual just true isolation, like solitary confinement stuff. I know Jack has done some research into isolation as a topic as well, and so I'm kind of excited just to jump into it. And Jack, I'll pass it to you. When you're going through your isolation, I'll give you a starting point here. When you're going through your research, what is something that popped up to you that you're like, man, I want to talk about this. This is something I want to bring forward that I found.
There's a couple of cool little factoids I found that were pretty interesting. Who's technically been in the most isolation, as far as we know. It's just different because when I was doing my research, there's isolation, solitude, loneliness. There are different levels of isolation. And then you get down to the nitty gritty, there's emotional isolation. So there's a lot of it's a very complex subject to actually tackle. But what's interesting is that almost every single person has felt isolated at some point, because loneliness and solitude are not the same as isolation. They're two different things. So
I definitely.
If I can give some definitions here, solitude is the state of being alone, plain and simple. Isolation is the lack of social relationships or emotional support, and loneliness is craving for social contact. Often linked to feelings of sadness and emptiness. So, you kind of got some close definitions, but they're pretty distinct when you get down into them. So, if I can just jump into some of these, I just want to get these stories out of the way because these are interesting. So, I'm just going to read kind of verbatim what I have written down. Hey, Ellie, can you not play with your toys right there, please? There have been many events of isolation in the past. Some were of unnamed Polynesian explorers who got lost exploring the Pacific Ocean, which is pretty terrifying.
Imagine,
because I forget, I didn't write down the year, but so there are these neighboring islands down by Indonesia and kind of up above Australia, New Zealand, around that whole kind of area. When they were discovering these islands, there's a few here and there, but then a lot of cases you probably just went in between them.
Right.
And who knows if they found anything. But so that's a case of kind of unknown isolation that we have records of. There's also the 6 astronauts who stayed orbiting the moon during the Apollo missions. Their names, because I feel like they never get credit: Mike Collins, Dick Gordon, Stu Rosa, Al Warden, Ken Mattingly, and Ron Evans. So just for some explanation here, these are the guys who they dropped off the people to actually walk on the moon, and then while they were doing their moon stuff, jumping around, having fun, collecting rocks or whatever,
their moon stuff,
they went back. They were in orbit.
Yeah.
And so they would go to the dark side of the moon, which is about, like a couple thousand miles away from where they dropped off the people on the moon. And once they hit the dark side of the moon, radio waves no longer reach them. So it's just
interesting
silence. And it's just them. So they're technically the most isolated, lonely anyone's ever been, through technicality.
Interesting.
Then there is I have 2 more. The French mariner Pierre-Francois Pierron and his crew wrote that he was marooned on an island so they were marooned on an island for 3 years between 1792 and 95. Miron, in his journals, he describes his experiences that were published in a limited edition, which is now an expensive collector's item. But it wasn't as far as the astronauts, but he and his crew were just on this island for 3 years.
Right.
Stranded for whatever reason. This one is of a British explorer named Robert Falcon Scott, and from 1911 to January 12th, he and his crew were getting to the center of Antarctica. They're trying to be the first ones, but they're beaten by the Norwegian explorer team, and so they had to walk the hundreds of kilometers to there, only to discover that the Norwegians had gotten there 30 days earlier, and so then they had to walk back. One of the guys on the way back got frostbite on his foot, and from his own volition left the group to not slow them down, just walking away into the white horizon.
Just
and then
to die?
Yeah, just so he wouldn't slow them down.
Wow.
And then
okay.
All of them ended up dying, sadly, just due to cold and whatever else. And they assume he was the last one to die, the actual leader of the explorers. The closest city to them, other than the other explorers on Antarctica, was New Zealand. So that's a horrible way to go. So I just wanted to kind of bring up those. Those are kind of some experiences of kind of solitude, isolation, and loneliness. Kind of a little bit of everything.
Right.
So I just kind of want to give an overview of experiences that people probably didn't know about, or if you did, a little bit of a refresher. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. And so now we can kind of get into more of the, levels of isolation that I feel like more people experience, which is emotional isolation. And before I kind of continue on about that, Charlie, do you want to take off anything? Do you got anything you want to add or say?
Yeah, no, definitely. So what's so interesting, I think, about all of those stories, and I think the one that sticks out the most to me is the astronauts on the dark side of the moon. As we, as humanity, are pushing forward into space, that isolation is something that we're really going to have to deal with and kind of be okay with. Because right now, I mean, you're looking at months travel to Mars, and it's not just, I mean, there's being stranded on an island, which I'm sure is equally as terrifying, especially the farther back you rewind the clock of history, But
well said.
Exactly. I mean, but if you want to talk about such a far away and kind of cosmic horror, I mean, if you get trapped, I mean, look at The Martian. I mean, people who get trapped on these planets far away, or trapped in a ship that loses power, or I mean, you're looking at missions where people are going to have to be okay with dying. You know what I mean? Which is insane to me that, we're going almost full circle when it comes to exploration, because most of our world, is explored now. I mean, give or take, deep underwater areas and, mountains or isolated just random bits in the forest. But we understand our world, and we understand how that works. But what if we were to land on Venus or Mars or what some of the other planets? I mean, you're getting to a point where you don't know how the weather works. You don't know what the planet is like. I mean, in a lot of these planets, I mean, you're looking at like No Man's Sky planets where it's just desolate nothing, for everywhere. On the moon, it's not like on the moon you're going to find some like hidden cache of resource or some sign that people have been there before other than other landings, but there's just nothing. And so that kind of cosmic, that kind of explorer mentality of like pushing into the unknown despite such great risk, that kind of stuff is very appealing to me, and definitely something I think almost calls to me in such a way, like that idea of a dangerous journey or a dangerous adventure, excuse me, into the unknown. So that's what stuck out to me the most about that, Jack. I mean, I'll let you go ahead and continue with some of your other notes, but that I don't know, intrigues me.
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of, when you think about it, space exploration is not that far removed from just, like you said, our planetary exploration. I mean, there are times when, hey, I'm going to go sail off into this, because if you've ever been to the ocean, you stand on like, the sand, the beach, and you're looking, and all you see is nothing but blue, of the sky and the ocean, whatever. And it's, who was like the first guy to stand there and be like, I'm going to go out there. Bro, I'm just going to see what's out there. And having no idea if he's going to reach anything, it's almost like, we as a species are kind of made to have these ideas that we can't help but expand on and explore.
Right.
Right. I feel like that's one thing that sets humans apart from any of our other ancient ancestors, is that we have the ability to be like, hey, there's something more than this, and we're going to figure out how to get there. Right. I think that's always been something very interesting about us as a species. But I mean, isolation is something that I think we can all kind of relate to during the COVID pandemic, especially. It's, I was fortunate to always be having someone to come home to after work, with Laura and Ellie, and, you and Kate, and then... but there are people who didn't have anyone to come home to. And I can't imagine how rough that was, because you can't really interact with people the way you used to. And you get home, and you're supposed to just to stay home. And that was a rough time. And so there's a couple different levels of isolation that we all felt during that. And, so some of them were personal choices prior to the pandemic, staying home all day. Personal choice, but some people did do that because they just felt more comfortable there.
Right.
Having headphones when we go to the store is a level of isolation. Because for me personally, I like kind of being in my own world when I go out into the actual world, because it helps me just be centered.
Right.
But I don't have a problem with like headphones off, I don't have that problem. But if I know I'm not going to talk to anyone, I'm just going to be in my own thoughts for a little bit, It's kind of nice.
Well, and to interrupt, Jack, I mean, that comes down to, I think, like a very base, 50-50 coin flip of, well, it's not 50-50, but like, introverted and extroverted people. So like most of the people in our family are pretty introverted. You know what I mean? Like even you and like I would say like some of our younger brothers that do hang out and are more extroverted, I still think ultimately, we're all pretty introverted people. And there's definitely an appeal, I wouldn't say not to loneliness or isolation, but to solitude. And what I think, both you and I have such a good grasp on is how those lines can blur, how the need to be alone can sometimes turn into, oh, hey, I'm lonely in a crowded room. I mean, to be, cliche, or to, use a cliche, but
there's got to be a
there's
I'm forgetting, but
there's like definitely an aspect of that as well, like that idea of wanting to be alone in your own world. I mean, as somebody who writes, that's what I'm doing most of the time. Like it's just me, you know.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of it, and I would love to do some deep kind of research into that idea of introversion and extroversion, like why some people are wired that way. And I don't know if there would be necessarily a definite answer, but
or correlation,
or like a correlation, because like it's just like I can imagine, not to be like political or bring up politics, but like I imagine being president is extremely isolating. Being president is probably extremely isolating. Being in a position of power is probably extremely isolating unless you have the personality type to kind of cope with that or cope with it in your own way. And so it is interesting how that bar, like some people can be at home for 4 hours and be like, oh my God, I need to get out of here. I need to see somebody. I need to go out. And me, I'm like, dude, I'll stay home all day. No problem. I mean, at least 4 days off I had, like, I've just been like a homebody and just been doing nothing, and it's been great.
Yeah.
Like I could probably take another 4 days of it and I would be fine. So it's interesting that people have different limits with it as well. Like it's definitely not like a, one size fits all. Like some people might go and stand at the top of Mount Everest by themselves and feel, empowered by the solitude. And some people might go up there and be like, this makes me feel so small and insignificant and unimportant, and I hate it. And both of those are valid responses. I mean, how could you hold that against anybody?
It's interesting because humans at our core, we are very social. If you ever watch anything about humans and anything, they're always going to say, humans are very social animals, which we are. Like, it is so difficult for us to develop unless we have some kind of social structure. Yeah. And the people who, don't have, a lot of friends or whatever tend to kind of be more isolated. And which isn't a bad thing because, again, we're social creatures. So you cannot have friends like in middle school or high school. But, hey, you go to college, boom, you meet the right person, friends, whatever, we're able to adapt very quickly as well. But some people also adapt to having that lack of friends or social structures. So, there's a difference between, I feel like, it being a choice, because some people can deal with the choice being like, I want to be alone. I don't mind being alone. If I need some kind of social interaction, I can go to the store, talk to the cashier I'm checking out. Right. I can have a conversation with someone as I'm, sitting on the bench at the park or something. Like some people have lots of ways to cope. However, when it isn't really a choice is when isolation occurs because of anxieties or abandonment or something that happened in their life that was very, altering. So that kind of leads into emotional isolation, which when I was reading about emotional isolation, it kind of was weird because I felt in a way I am emotionally isolated because whenever I get into any kind of, not any, but some stressful situations or high, situations where there is a, very high emotion, I feel myself start to shut down emotionally. And what I'm doing research, this kind of stuff can occur during difficult times in a person's life, often used as a defense mechanism. A person can be isolated even if they have a social structure because everything is very superficial to them. And that's something, because I remember a time when I was really into things, and it was a passion or whatever. But now it's hard for me to not be anything but superficial, not with everything or everyone, but, it's hard for me to get super excited about stuff anymore. It's hard for me to become emotionally invested in, relationships. It's a weird thing that a lot of people feel though. So
I got a little bit of a story for you.
Yeah, give me a story.
Give me a little bit of story.
Give me a story. I was kind of rambling there, and I apologize.
No. You're fine. You actually, I mean, your rambling unlocked a memory for me. So, to be honest, Jack, I really feel like for a period of 3.5, almost 4 years, I was a lot like that. And really, this coincided with me going to school. Going to school at the time, like I was kind of getting away from difficult situations at home, situations that Jack had to stay there and deal with, so we won't go into details. Things are better, much better now, but going into a public states college, didn't have a job lined up, was a transfer. I had done some classes, at a community college. But I was really only going to college because I felt like I had to, because, everybody was like, hey, if you don't go to college, your life is going to be ruined. Your life is going to suck if you don't go to college, ABC, whatever. And in some ways, I think that as a defense, I did exactly what you did. Everything became superficial to me, because all that really mattered was, hey, I need to work and make enough money so I can actually live here and buy food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ultimately, that was all that mattered, because, why does learning about some abstract concept or putting time and effort into, some kind of social event, I could be working and I could be making money, so why would I do anything else? And I very quickly fell into that trap where, I would see all these people who had much better, starting platforms than I did. They, got a head start, and so didn't have to work, or their parents could pay. In no way I'm saying if that was your situation, and you gained a lot from it, and you're like, wow, he's really hating on college life. No, I'm not hating on that at all, but this is just how I felt at the time. So coming out of that, I'll give you like a specific example. So, like, for example, like, I watched the movie Ponyo for the first time in college, right?
Ponyo.
Let me tell you what, I hated Ponyo. I'll be honest, I did. And I was like, like, it wasn't serious enough. Wasn't deep enough, et cetera, et cetera. But I think very much like how you were saying earlier, it was a defense mechanism. I didn't want to let myself like anything, because if I didn't let myself like anything, I wouldn't ever be disappointed by anything.
Yeah.
But I think with when I came back and kind of gotten back into life here, and definitely over the last, I would say, 3.5, 4 years being back in Tulsa, I've really been able to kind of like open back up and actually be excited for things. I mean, you guys have heard me talk about the Marvel stuff. I mean, Loki finale, I was hyped for it. I mean, I'm hyped for the Dead Space remake. I'm excited about exploring new things and, rewatching movies. Like, Kate and I, we watched when Disney Plus first came out. We were going through all the old animated movies. We watched, the Studio Ghibli movies when they came out on HBO Max. And, I watched Ponyo again, and I'm like, this movie is great. Like, why did I hate this movie? Like, what kind of like jaded bastard was I to like just be like, oh man, this is kids.
It's a very kids Studio Ghibli movie, and so.
But like, it's very sweet, and like the message in it's really good. It's a beautiful movie. Like, it just it makes you feel good, like, to watch it. And
Ellie loves that movie.
It's sad that like there was a point in my life where I looked at that and I was like, man, because this is a kids movie and because it doesn't have deep or dark themes, at least on the surface, I think there are some kind of deep themes in there, but I just dismissed it. I was like, no, this is pointless. Just like I dismissed my classes, and just like I dismissed things that I felt like weren't important. And so I totally get where you're coming from, and I think it's all about ultimately getting to know yourself more, and that's what I feel like I've really been trying to do since college, is trying to figure out myself more, because ultimately when it comes down to it, if I know myself really well, then I can make better decisions about things I need to do. And it's not just, oh, hey, I'm going to go to college because everybody else told me. It's like, no, I'm going to go to college because this is my plan and this is what I want to do. And I need to make the decision for myself, and it can't be influenced by this outside information. Yeah. And so I totally feel that, like, not being excited thing, you know. But that is, I will say, for me, that has changed recently. Like, I definitely am getting hyped for stuff, and I'm excited for things, and I mean, this podcast honestly has helped me a lot in that same respect. I mean, you know, coming up with these ideas, like wanting to talk about something nebulous like isolation. I mean, I would not have had the confidence to do that when we first started the podcast. We were talking about childhood memories, you know. But I can see the through line now of like, okay, Charlie, you really like talking about those nebulous kind of emotional, I don't know, quagmire topics. So, you know, sorry to hijack your story there, but that's kind of just what it made me think of, you know, that way that I isolated to such an extent that I hated Ponyo. Like, really? Like, really? That's what I did. Anyways.
Yeah, so, I mean, kind of just where I was going with that is, you know, like you said, you know, you've kind of worked through it. I feel like I've worked through a lot of, you know, emotional isolation and disconnect that I used to have. There still is some of it that I'm working on. And if I find myself in those moments where, because I can tell when I'm shutting off. And so, you know, I try to really identify that and then prevent it actually happening, or at least all the way. Because it's this weird, like, it's hard to describe, because it's almost like there's someone sitting there, like, trying to turn a switch, you know, like on off, but like you can kind of feel them struggling to do it because they don't really want to, but they're like, I should though, because this is what we used to do all the time. But, you know, and so there's more of a struggle than it's just like, yeah, I'm in defensive mode now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but that's, like, isolation plays into so many different aspects of our life, and this is just a guess. I don't really know, but it almost seems like the more sure of yourself you are, the more you can adapt to isolation, because you know what excites you. You know what to do when you get bored. You know how to entertain yourself. You can find out new things to do because you know yourself. And the people that struggle with it more so are people that haven't found themselves as much yet. Is I don't know if it's actually true, but it seems like something that would correlate in my opinion. So, I mean, you look at in the pandemic. I know it's sad, but usage of prescription drugs went up, alcohol rates went up, physical abuse went up in like relationships and stuff like that, and that kind of stuff is horrible. And it's just a lot of people don't know what to do when isolation just, you know, happens. Or, you know, I can't, you know, I don't drink, but like, man, I can't go to the bar and drink with my friends 5 nights out of the week. Man, I guess I'll just drink twice as much and at home, you know? So it's, you know, things just, they weren't good for a while there. And I think there's still a lot of recovering from that. So, especially with, I believe, the millennial generation, is just, we're kind of a generation that really struggles with, you know, we're a generation that needs a lot of therapy. We have a lot of coping mechanisms that aren't good.
You know, it's funny. I was joking with Kate, and I was saying, you know, like, so boomers, so like the generation right above us, I feel like a default boomer response is to get angry with something. Now, of course, I am in no way trying to blanket label an entire group of people. I'm just saying as like the general theme. But millennials tend to be much more whiny, and like they really think about things almost to a detriment, I would say. Because there are some times where you need to stop thinking about something and like go and just do something else, and that'll help. You know what I mean? And so like I see that weird tug of like that social tug of war where millennials are like, no, like my life sucks and I can't deal with it. And then boomers being like, hey, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and get to
yourself up and, you know, have a drink and, you know. And
it's like, well, the realistic answer is both. You know, like, I'm sorry that's a complicated answer, but it's kind of both. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it is really complicated, yeah.
It's not just like the simple one-size-fits-all thing.
It's very strange.
Oh, God, man. Jack, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'll let you speak in a second, but like, talking about like this like isolation of social media as well. I mean, that's such a big
Ooh, yeah, how it's not really social technically.
That's such a big thing that is both very positive for people and then very negative for people, you know? Like
Yeah.
there are people who meet the person they're going to marry online. But then there are people who see everything online and they're like, "Man, my life sucks." You know? And social media just isolates them more and more. And it's so addictive as well. And there are people that seem to feed from that, and then there's some people that seem to like it just sucks them, it just like sucks them dry of like anything. And so, man, that I feel like the social media topic is definitely a topic I'd like to do maybe in this run. But
yeah, I think that'd be a really long episode.
I know I was gonna bring up some more social media stuff, but we'll wait. Everybody out there, if you'd like to hear
I think
an episode about social media, let us know, and I would love to do one. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, because even though a lot of what you see on social media isn't reality, there's still that underlying thought you have of, but they're able to present this extravagant whatever, and it kind of sucks when you look around and you're like, man, I don't have anything extravagant that I could even pretend is going super well for me, you know what I mean? And so it's I don't know, social media, it's more so just media now. And a lot of people get stuck in their own echo chambers and their own rabbit holes of whatever they want to go down, good or bad. So say you're on Twitter. I just use Twitter to tweet when I go live because I stream, or to keep in touch with some friends or see how they're doing. But also, I like seeing the political discourse that's incredibly one-sided and, divisive. So, I don't know. If you ever go down like a political discourse on Twitter, it's like the worst rabbit hole you can go down. Because you'll just keep getting more and more angry at how stupid so many people are. So, I mean, but I just want to say, like, isolation is also like a really interesting topic to, I think, humans in general, because so many of our movies, our games, our books are about isolation.
Beautiful. What a beautiful transition.
Yet again, Dead Space.
Oh, I got you one better.
The Last of Us. Shadow of the Colossus.
Oh, so if we're talking about isolation in games, like
that was more about solitude, though.
Well, isolation and solitude and loneliness, like all wrapped into one. Like you said, Jack, I think it's a very captivating topic for people, and it's because it's such a, I believe, natural and kind of like fundamental thing that people feel. You know what I mean? I mean, we can talk about how like you can feel lonely anywhere, you can feel isolated anywhere, you can have the joy of solitude anywhere. You know what I mean? You can have the joy of solitude if you're on a crowded bus, having your headphones on and looking out the window. You know what I mean? But I mean, such fascination to an extent. I mean, Jack was listing them off earlier, but I believe kind of the winner in this is Shadow of the Colossus. I mean, that game is, not to go too in depth about it, but it's all about one person, your character, and you're trying to bring back a loved one. And to do this, you need to travel to this isolated, lonely land where there's nobody else except these huge colossi that you have to defeat in order to bring your loved one back. And so it's you and your horse, and sometimes it's you talk to the god of this world who tells you to go kill the colossi, But that game was always so fascinating to me because in some ways you can kind of work through some of those feelings in like a safe and removed space. And what I love so much about that game is like these huge empty expanses where you see like a couple birds, you maybe see a little lizard.
Just about to say that.
And it's just nothing. And there's something about that for me personally that's not scary or not like doesn't make me feel small. But like I love that. Like I love that open expanse. You can get into movies like Blade Runner 2049 or Arrival. Or it's a lot of these movies that have these big, expansive things that try to make you feel small and make you feel like, in some ways, everything that you're dealing with, every aspect of your life is nothing compared to what has been before. I know that in saying that sounds negative because you think, man, how insignificant my life is. But for me, and this might fly in the face of most people, but I would love to hear if it kind of resonates with some others. But for me, I've always really enjoyed that kind of small, insignificant feeling. When you watch videos about the depths of space or how little we understand about like black holes or talking about like the Laniakea supercluster of galaxies. I mean, we're talking about spaces and concepts and things that are outweigh us by like, millions of orders of magnitude. And somehow, even though we are these tiny, insignificant people on one planet, we've been able to like observe and see and theorize about all this. And it reminds me of, and I'm sorry, Jack, I know I'm rambling on here, but I'll go back to you here in a second.
No, go ahead.
But it reminds me of, I watched this talk one time. It was these two, like, God, we're getting a little religious here, but it's fine. I would love to do one of religion as well. But these two atheist guys, and they're talking about how, a common response against atheism is, man, well, after you die, there's nothing. It isn't that horrifying. Or like your life is meaningless beyond what you do in life. And he said, a response that really resonated with me was, it's fascinating because, yes, in some ways that's true. If there is nothing out there, you just die when you die and that's it. But then also you have to take into context, like we live in an age to where like we've mapped out like human genomes and DNA and we can see so far into space and, we have history at our fingertips. We, and it's all these things that make you appreciate that like life, yes, is always going to be keep moving on. And like, I think the best way to be a part of it is to enjoy it and not fear so much what comes after. Because ultimately, like, you will have a better and healthy and happy life if you treat people in healthy and happy ways. You know what I mean? And so like this idea that you're so insignificant is almost kind of refreshing because that takes some of the pressure off you to like have to accomplish so much. I mean, if you think back to history, Jack, like we know the names of like Roman emperors and dictators, but like how many billions of people that we have no idea what they did, they could have had amazing lives and that was just for them. And that's kind of beautiful in a way. You know what I mean? There's kind of like a very, I don't know, like a tug of war of emotion with that because it's like, yes, it's so sad that like nobody remembers them, but like ultimately like what is going to be remembered and those who do remember it is important to them and them alone. And like, I don't know, there's something that's like kind of comforting about that to me. And I don't know why. I've always kind of thought about that. And I'm like, that's weird that like, I don't feel insignificant or that feeling of insignificance is almost kind of reassuring to me because that means that like, man, as much as I could do in my life is just this force that is like constantly pushing forward from our perspective, and I can't do anything about that. I can't. Like there is nothing I can do, And so like in some ways it's reassuring. I don't know. Does that resonate with you, Jack, or does that just sound like nonsense to you?
No, I mean it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I believe that you and I think in a few pretty similar ways, and this is probably one of those topics where knowing that my life is probably pretty insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Sorry, English. Is like totally fine because something I always remember when you talk about these amazing emperors or kings or leaders is that history is always written by the victors. You never hear the stories of people who lost, or if you do, you hear that they lost and that's all you hear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but those are so there's so much that went on that we have no idea about.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can almost take comfort in the fact that I'm part of that history that more than likely no one's going to really know about, but I'm the one who kind of, we're part of the huge gear that keeps things moving. And so,
and it,
that's, it's a feeling I think we all feel, but we all have come to terms in their own ways. Either it be, you find comfort in, hey, that giant gear is actually, the religion I follow, or it's, it's personal fulfillment, or it's the mark I leave on the earth, if I can leave a mark.
Right.
Which is becoming more and more difficult because, you can't really go out and conquer a nation anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, you're not in that age where you could like just take what you want anymore. I mean, you could, but you go to jail.
So, well, I mean, and I'd rather be known for something that I'm passionate for than something I get viral for, especially.
Yeah. No, do
you know what I mean?
That is such a good way to put it. Like, I would much rather be remembered by my friends and family and loved ones than I would be remembered by 3 million people for something I did one time. You know what I mean? Because those people don't know me. They know the one thing I did, but the people who love me.
Hey, isn't it the guy who drops 4 Starbucks drinks?
Right. You know what I mean?
He was handing him out. We caught him on TikTok. Here's your drink, ma'am. Ah!
But it's I guess in some ways there's like maybe a little bit of bias on my part because I really, and I guess it's maybe sad and maybe where some people that do know me, especially like family members and stuff, might be upset to hear this, but I truthfully don't believe that there is anything else out there, and if there is, like, my kind of view on it, it's like, hey, we don't know how time works. Like, we see time from one perspective, but time really could be something just as twisty and weird as the 3D world is to somebody who is only 2D. You know what I mean? So we don't understand. And I'm fine with that because that drive to understand, bringing this all the way back to that explorer feel, is it's a very similar feeling. I mean, there's a good Futurama episode about it where eventually they discover everything that's to be discovered, and Professor Farnsworth is like, "What's the point of living anymore? Like, we did it. Yeah, you got 100%." You know what I mean? It's why would you play a game that you've done everything in? And that's a very weird response. Like, there's this idea of like. Like with you in Minecraft, Jack, for example, it's like you feel like you've done what Minecraft has to offer for you. Why would you go back and play it? To get the trophies? To get the achievements? Why are you playing Skyrim again? Because, hey, you can get the trophies and achievements, so there are things to do.
You called it.
And so, like, there's definitely a very, I don't know, parallel feeling with, hey, the existential, the thoughts, the emotional, the human side of existence that we still have to work on. I mean, we as human beings are like still murdering each other, by the millions and hurting each other. And those are the things I'm more concerned about in life, more so than my everlasting soul. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, I know I can be a good person and I can be, a good boyfriend or in a good relationship, or a good brother, and I can see where there's room for improvement, communication. I could be more communicative. I could be more open, and I could be more like, oh, no, that doesn't work for me. You know what I mean? But those are the things that concern me, and not so much this idea that, like, hey, I need to fill this notebook of stuff that when I go, I can show and say, hey, I showed faith here. I know it feels like I'm hating on people who have religion, but what I'm saying is that's how different, and I'll wrap it all back around and hand it back to you, Jack, but that's how different isolation is. Because there could be a person of faith in my position who feels incredibly isolated because they don't have that link to their faith. And that is horrible. But for me personally, it's kind of fulfilling. You know what I mean? And I would feel isolated if I was following a faith I didn't believe in because I didn't believe in it. So And I have in my life and in the world we live in, I'm free to do that. And I am so grateful because there are places in the world where if I didn't believe, I could just be killed. And it's like, so I have to be thankful for like what I have here and, put everything through that lens. And ultimately, where I am in now life right now is not isolating and is not lonely. And so it's like, that's all I can ask for.
No, yeah. So I mean, that's why like the human experience is so unique to everybody, but at the same time, it's also very similar because everyone at some point has felt, all the emotions everyone else has felt, but at different levels and different circumstances. And there's just something about us where, hey, yeah, when I was 6 years old, my brother, kicked I was probably like 10. My brother kicked my teeth out on the trampoline and I bled everywhere, but it was funny the next day, and that's a funny memory. Or there's some people that get that and that becomes like, in a sense, like a repressed memory. Like that was very scarring and I haven't been on trampoline since then. And anytime I went to a friend's birthday party and they're like, hey, let's jump on the trampoline. I was like, nah, I can't because,
right.
Of whatever. And so I think when we're talking about stuff like isolation, it's important to note that for each person, isolation, even though there's a definition,
Yeah.
to each person it's defined differently.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And some people define it by, hey, well, your isolation is what you're saying, not having found, religion or, anything like that, or, isolation to them is not knowing what's going to happen after. Where some people, that's kind of freeing, knowing that I don't know if there's anything that's going to happen after I die, but I'm going to live my life as if when I die, that's it. And so I'm going to work on what I have here now. And so in your case, it's freeing. Other people, they find it very scary. And, it's something that they, fear for their entire life.
Yeah.
And, that's another thing that I'm glad our parents were kind of, we were fortunate to where our parents are religious, but they never forced it upon us really.
Yeah.
We went to church when we were like young kids.
Yeah.
But, I remember my mom specifically saying, our mom, she was like, Jack, my mom specifically, she likes me more. She was like, Jack, like I know that you haven't necessarily, found the Lord yet, but, when he, when it's the right time for him to present himself to you or the right time for you to find him, I'm sure you will. And I was like, that's, I can agree with that. Like if he does exist and there is a right time and place for him to be in my life, I'm open to that, but until that point, I'm not just going to blindly believe something just to kind of save face. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And of course,
and so,
sorry, go ahead.
I know we're kind of getting off the topic of isolation a little bit, but at the same time, we're not, because it's a very encompassing topic because you can feel it in so many different ways and aspects of your life. And, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where to go from that. If you want to kind of take over.
So,
I know you've been doing a lot of talking, but I'm trying to still like formulate these ideas because it is a very intense topic, and I did do a lot of research for it.
Right.
But it's just an intense topic once you get into it.
No, it is. And so I think what I would like to take it now is we've talked a lot about really a bunch of stuff, tangenting away from the main theme of isolation, but kind of always circling back because, as we said, and I think as you said, Jack, like part of the human experience is being isolated, and you can't escape that. Like just as there are so many things, like sadly, like love and kindness is not always a part of the human experience for people, but isolation is. And it's so interesting that isolation, solitude, loneliness, that we have all these different words that can be positive and negative for people. You know what I mean? And so I think, as I'd like to do, kind of round us out here, we can still go for a little bit longer, but as to kind of round it out, like, Jack, I would like to know, like, what is the time that you felt isolated and what helped you come out of it? What was the source of this isolation? And then what kind of brought you out of it? I would love to hear about a time like that.
It was probably back, a couple years ago. when, with my ex-girlfriend, back when I went and lived back, I was living at our parents' house for a while with our dog Sonic. But because I had to take him away from our complex because they didn't allow his breed. And so I was at our house for a month. I was kind of taking care of everything there. And we had to give, our dog had to go away. My girlfriend and I were broken up. And so she moved and I moved back into the apartment. And I walk in and it's just trashed. I mean, because she had some of the people there, so it there was just like trash everywhere, dishes weren't done, yada. And so I got home from work because that's when we cleaned banks, and so I got home from work and it was just what do I do? And it was like 1 a.m. and I just started cleaning up, and then I went back to our parents' house, grabbed my computer, PlayStation, whatever, and I still had to clean up, but I set up that stuff because that was back when we had that big gray van. Remember the gray van? Uh-huh. Love driving that car because I just like driving the van. But took all stuff out of the van, set up in the corner by the kitchen, hooked up the computer. I turned on some Sips. I think he was playing some game. Sips is a YouTuber that we watched. He might have been playing Prison Architect. Turned that on YouTube. And then I just turned on the PlayStation and, I felt very alone for the entirety of the time until turned on the game. And I just kind of started playing. I was like there's a sense of normalcy. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm able to center, because before I could feel myself kind of losing myself and just wanting to give in to this sucks. I'm not going to recover from this. And I don't want to go to work anymore. I don't want to see family. I just want to deal with this by myself. But as I kind of started to get back into, the headspace of no, keep going. Everyone has to keep going. Yeah. I, was like, all right, I'm going to get this going. I think I started playing on my phone, actually. The YouTube video, set that down aside, cleaned for a little bit. And then after I cleaned, I then got on the PlayStation. And I don't know what I started playing. I don't remember. But that kind of helped bring me back down to a sense of normalcy. And so for me, that's one of the things that I kind of go to always kind of relax or take it easy or center myself, is just games in general. Right. Because while they are games, they are still important to me. And they've always kind of, helped me just take it easy.
Yeah.
Because it's something I'm very familiar with, or even just editing videos or whatever, just kind of being in a creative space or place that I can, in a sense, turn my brain off a little bit.
Right.
That's always super nice, and so I like places that I'm able to escape to with my imagination or be stimulated by via video game.
Right.
Because, I don't drink. I don't do anything. And so I've never drank my problems away. And I've always kind of faced everything very head on.
Right.
And so that's a good grounding mechanism for me. So that was one of my personal things where I felt very isolated, and I figured out that I can bring myself back from these kind of very much darker feelings by doing something that I've kind of always had in my life. Because when I play games, it reminds me of when you and I play games, when I play games with my friends and family, when I stream or interact with people, or just, hey, I just need to get some trophies, or this game I haven't played in a while, feel like jumping back into it, feeling nostalgia, whatever. There's always something there to kind of, ground me in a way. So
yeah,
there's that story.
I think for me, the worst isolation I think I felt, it was not through COVID, because at that point I think I had kind of changed the way I thought about things, and I had a lot more positive things in my life. And when we were first isolating, I was overwhelmed with work, and work was really dumb. And then we got the message, hey, you're going home for 2-3 weeks, and around that time I believe Kate was also sent home. And so my isolation started really positively, where I was like, oh, thank God I get a break and I'm getting paid for it, and I feel like I can recapture my life a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the worst for me was when I was managing at my like management job, when I was managing a store within the downtown library. And that was a weird one because I think what isolated me was how I felt that everything that happened at that job was so important, you know? So, hey, your team isn't working out. This is a mark against you. This job is how you're going to define your life going forward. This job is going to set the stage for you making more money, et cetera, right? And so that was my mindset going into the job. And as the job went further and further and I worked more and more, I just felt myself closing off and becoming empty because I was like, the only thing that matters is the job. Very similar to when I was in college, right? Like that very similar feeling of like, you know, and of course, you know, I'm not entirely like innocent in this. Like I could have like said more or stuff, but you know, I was just so in my head. And I think what helped me come out of that and kind of break out of that mold is I told myself, you know, like this job and work and money, yes, jobs and work and money are important. And I don't want to sound like I'm saying that they're not, but those things, for some people, they find what they want to do right away, right? And either through circumstance, luck, hard work, whatever it is, they're in and they're good, you know? But that's not the way it worked for me. And I had to tell myself, like, hey, like, ultimately, like, this is not that important, you know? Like, your health and mental well-being are more important than this job, you know? I mean,
yeah,
go ahead.
If I can interject, I remember you struggling a lot, especially the last couple months during that time. And I don't know if it's okay if I get a little personal.
I mean, what are you gonna say?
I mean, you know, at that time you were drinking.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry. I was like,
yeah.
The way you said that, I was like,
is
this something I don't know? Like, no, that's
no.
Exactly
so
what
I
was
remember
bring
like,
up, yeah.
I remember like seeing that. And I was like, I need to talk to him,
right,
like about this.
Right.
So I just
that's
I remember like that was a very dark time for you, especially.
You know, and I guess it's kind of it's so funny looking back on that time because like I feel like I'm so much better now. Yeah, I really don't mind talking about it. Like, yeah, like I mean, the only way I could cope at that point is I could drink my problems away. And I think that was a big difference, like, with me, is that, like, I did fall into that vice. And, like, recently, as of, January, like, I kind of, like, cut myself off. And I've been, like, I mean, I've had a couple drinks when people come over for D&D, but, like, I haven't been, like, drunk since, last December, you know? And so it's like I finally was able to break out of that. But my isolation is like that type of isolation where I don't feel like, let me put it that way, I don't feel like I have the freedom of thought or the freedom of choice anymore, you know? And choice as in, hey, I can approach this day with a positive mood. When every day starts to blend together and become this kind of just miasma of like suffering, and you're like, I don't know how to get out, you know? And it's so funny, Jack. I mean,
you're just kind of going through the motions of every
day. It's so funny because, like, you know, we recently had this competition at work, and I participated, and I was talking to one of the district managers.
Did you win?
No, I didn't. A little bummed out about it, to be honest. I'm a little... Anyways, that's a whole other story. But
it was rigged.
I feel like it was a little rigged, yeah. Anyways, but the district manager, he's like, hey, when do you want to promote? And I'm like, dude, I don't want to. And I told him that. I was like, the only reason I would promote is to make a bigger paycheck. Like, I don't care about this job. And not because, you know, I do think that there's like an essence where like work will be work, you know? Even if work is something you love, you know, you'll always have this element of like, man, I don't want to do this. But here's the thing. One positive thing that's come out of all of this, and, you know, I guess in an effort to move this conversation into more of a positive area rather than so negative, is that coming out of it, at least for me personally, I feel like it gave me excellent perspective, because now I know what that middle management feeling is, and that is a horrible position to be in. You know, because our district manager was like, "Well, how much did you make at the library?" And I was like, "I think I made what, 35,000 a year." You know, and he goes, "Oh, I could pay you more than that." And I was like, "Okay, I'd love to sit down with you and kind of pick your brain sometimes." But I didn't say yes, or I didn't say I was interested, because here's the thing: it's his job to promote people and make more managers so he can look better for him. And even if he were to say, "Hey, listen, you would only have to work 40 hours, you'd only do blah blah blah," I still would want to do it. And you know why? It's because I realized, like, what is the most isolating for me is when I have to be responsible for things that I don't care about. That, like, drags me down. And, like, having to be responsible to, like, fill gaps in the team, or to, like, find coverage, or to do this or to do that. And when really all I want to do is just have a moment to breathe, but I can't get that. Every time our manager leaves, Jack, she's always like, "Hey guys, I go on vacation for a week, but you guys can contact me anytime." When she says that, Jack, I'm like, if that was me, I would be like, "Hey, I'm going on vacation. I don't want to hear anything. Like, don't talk. Unless the store burns to the ground, I don't want to hear it." You know what I mean? Like, that's just, and I just realized that, like, that's a personality thing. Like, I cannot, like, it is not intriguing or a challenge to me to do this. And I am not going to buy into, like, this lifestyle. I'm not going to buy into this lifestyle. It's going to isolate me so I can make more money, and be unhappy again. Like, and, it's a back and forth, and it's a balance, because would it be the same as last time? No, of course not. Like, I have a much different perspective, and I have a much stronger voice than I did last time. Much more knowledge. But,
knowledge.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's so freeing now, and it helps with that feeling of loneliness now, to, like, have the knowledge about it, And that's one thing I think that's been so great about getting older, is that now when I have bad days, or bad days when I do feel lonely, I can look at it and say, "Hey, it is not going to be like this tomorrow. Get a good night's sleep, eat some food, go easy on yourself today, and approach tomorrow like it's going to be a new day." But, when you're younger, like when you're a teenager and you're dealing with those feelings for the first time, or, the 10th time, you're like, my life is always going to suck. It just is always going to. I mean, it's one of those things where when you break up, you break up with your first girlfriend or boyfriend or partner or whatever, and you're like, "I'm always going to be sad. Always." And then you're, like, years removed from it, and you're like, "Man, I remember that feeling like it was forever." But it's not. It's not, So.
Yeah, which is always.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, my big takeaway is, if you haven't already, or you're not already, really work on trying to find what makes you content and what makes you happy. Because I think that's a very important thing for people to, learn and understand about themselves. But it is a hard thing to find out. Like, it's going to take some sacrifices.
It is. And that's, I think, the perfect solution to kind of combat the negative aspects of isolation, loneliness, solitude, is to find what you enjoy to do. And like you said, Jack, like, that's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing in the world we live in right now, especially with COVID. And it's not an easy thing to do even before COVID, because so much of our, like, kind of approaching this from being isolated within society, so much of our society is, I feel like the Joker every time I say that, we live in a society. So much of society is, hey, you got the good job, you got the good car, you got the good house, you got the good money. You must be the happy person, But that's not true. It's not, There are, let's look at, okay, Jeff Bezos. Do you think Jeff Bezos is, like, a happy man? He might be happy in some aspects, But, like, I don't think he's probably, like, the most content person. I don't.
I mean, because he also has millions of people.
He's also just a human being.
Like,
you know what I mean? Like, he's
day.
just a person. And so it's like, that's one of those things where, you have to ultimately come at it as, what do you enjoy to do? And here's the thing. if you say, hey, you know what I enjoy to do is right now I enjoy, you know, I don't know, I enjoy just going outside and going on a walk. And that's all I know right now. That's fine. Like that is great. Do that because and give yourself the time. Like, I think often it feels so hard to be kind of in league with everyone else when you feel like everybody else is like 4 steps ahead of you. But I think what you have to realize is that nobody is really 4 steps. People are 4 steps ahead of you in certain aspects, Nobody, like, you might be a stronger person. You might be able to handle more than your friend who has the 3-figure job. You know what I mean? But they have more money than you. So It's all about perspective and being kind and giving yourself the time because, we're always told like, man, life is so short, and it is short. We don't have that much time in the grand scheme of things, but also life is really long. I mean, look back at your life 5 years ago, and would you have ever thought you would be where you are? And not just monetarily, not just, with, what you possess, but like mentally. Did you think you'd be here? Good or bad? Did you think you'd be here? That's how much or look back at just a year. Like, things change way more often than we think we do, but often that change is hidden and kind of the monotony. It's one of those things where, like, Jack, if I become a famous author, right, I can look back on my life and I can say, man, I worked for a corporate coffee company for 9 years, and the whole time I was writing, and finally I worked hard enough and I became a famous author, and that could be my story. And it's a great sounding story, right? It's the J.K. Rowling story of, hey, she's working her job and she's writing Harry Potter in her spare time. But you have to realize that, like, it's all perspective, because what if J.K. Rowling never got published? What if nobody liked Harry Potter, And it's like, so you can't hold yourself to these like standards and ideals that no one else is actually holding you to except you. Because like you can isolate yourself by doing that. Like you can hold yourself back and hold back anything that like you might need to accomplish for yourself because you say, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do it. That's, I guess, my kind of takeaway and kind of my final thoughts on isolation for now, even though I feel like I could say more.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've said a lot that can be said about isolation, and like it is a very deep topic that you can't get into more of the the nitty gritty with it. But I think we've covered it pretty substantially as far as real life experiences have gone, and just talking about our thoughts and examples of it in human life. There's been a lot we've covered a lot with this topic, I feel like, and I think it's also very kind of cathartic too. So
yeah. And that's Jack, that's why I wanted to do this topic and more topics like this. Because ultimately I like talking about these nebulous things, and kind of very much in the way that like childhood memories pulls from the whole pool of our childhood, and how there's so many things that I will forget until you bring it up, or I'll bring something up and it makes you remember. That I think with these kind of more emotional topics, these more like up in the air, you can take them in any direction topics, I tend to like more, because I feel like we can really talk more, and everyone listening out there can hear our unique opinions, and they can say, hey, that really resonates with me, or hey, Charlie's really stupid for saying that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's faster. I would love for somebody to say, hey, when you said this, that didn't make any sense. I'd be like, oh, no, it didn't. Because I'll be talking, and I am stretching, and I'm like, hey, how do I loop this back?
I do very
I've been talking about work.
Circular thinking sometimes. Just kind of like make a point. I kind of circle around a few times. So I'm trying to get better at that, though. So, and I feel like I have been, getting better at that. So it's just, I hope you guys enjoy this topic. And hey, chapter 5 is starting off with more thematic episodes. So suggest to us themes. We'll be releasing a poll up on Patreon and all that good stuff. So,
I also got to call out our Discord. I put in the Discord. Let me check the exact date I got it right here. Of the message.
This 23rd of July.
Yeah, so 2 days ago. I said, hey, everybody. This week's topic is a nebulous one of isolation. What comes to mind when you hear the word isolation? What realistic ideas? What abstract concepts? And nobody said anything. Jack Henry, what in the world?
Especially you, Jack.
Michael.
Jack and Michael
What in the
especially, but more so Jack because come on.
Kate, you get a pass because you're not on the Discord, so that's okay. That's fine.
And I live with you.
Lily, oh my gosh. All these people. I'm just kidding.
All
No,
these
I'm not trying to make you guys feel bad. But I would like going forward to kind of interact with you guys more and have conversations that we can kind of work into these topics.
Yes.
You know, it'd be nice to reference a thread of messages between us on Discord and say, hey, you know, we were kind of talking about this, and get it as more of a group effort, because as much as Jack and I are making this podcast, I mean, we're making this podcast for you guys, and I want you guys to be involved, especially these early patrons. So if you're listening to this and we're super popular, that time has passed. You can't be a part of this anymore. Most likely you will be able to. So, you know,
and
get in while you can. Get on the early adopters, man.
But that's all we got.
Jack,
for
that is
chapter 5.
all I have
for episode what?
Start stretching.
I was just trying to mimic whatever you were saying. So,
everyone,
thank you so
much. Oh my gosh, can't do it.
No, go ahead.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Raconteur collection. This is the first episode of Chapter 5, Isolation. As always, we've been Jack and Charlie. If you like what we do, you heard at the top, you can support us on Patreon. You can follow us on Spotify. I believe we're going to start posting videos or just audios to YouTube right now to try to expand our audience.
Yep.
Anyone out there who is really interested in what we do and loves what we do and like thinks, hey, I could help them with this, or they're not doing this, or it would be really cool if they did this, let us know. Like,
yes, please
send us a message on Instagram. Anything like that would be so helpful and awesome to have more people involved.
Definitely.
But as we do, we're going to go ahead and pass it over to Clumsy Titan, who I believe has a new sound for us. Has a new. We're not going to be sucked into.
You guys heard it in the beginning.
Matrix anymore.
This time we're getting lost in the music.
In the sauce.
Ah! All right.
Make sure the music comes in right there, so I don't just sound like an idiot.
All right. See you guys. They're going.
All right.
Deuces.
Bye, everybody.